In the heart of nature's wildest landscapes, from the Appalachian Trail and the rugged wilderness of British Columbia to Norway's remote forests, bear encounters can turn from awe-inspiring to life-threatening in moments. Join us as we explore 6 survival stories featuring polar bears, grizzlies, black bears, and Eurasian brown bears. Discover how quick thinking, preparation, and courage help these adventurers and researchers confront nature's giants and emerge with harrowing yet inspiring tales of survival. Through these stories, we'll underscore the importance of respect for wildlife and the vital need for safety measures in bear habitats. It was a sunny day in August 2020, and 2 friends, Alex Carmichael and Mark Welch, were reveling in the thrill of a snowmobile adventure in the vast expanse of Canada's Arctic tundra. The land stretched endlessly under a pale blue sky, and the air was crisp and biting cold. Some might find the Arctic tundra a desolate place. Still, Alex and Mark loved the beautiful wilderness, the sparse vegetation, icy expanses, and the occasional awe-inspiring sight of Arctic wildlife. The friends had been exploring this remote part of the world for days, riding their snowmobiles and having fun in the middle of the untouched beauty of the Arctic. Alex was 28 years old and Mark was 27. They were best friends, having met some years ago in college. They shared a love for adventure and extreme sports. As such, they had been to many daunting places, from remote deserts to tall mountain peaks. This, however, was their first time exploring the Arctic tundra. They were prepared for pretty much everything, their enthusiasm making up for their lack of experience. There was one thing they really wanted to avoid, though. They really didn't want to encounter polar bears. That Wednesday, however, as they decided to race their snowmobiles across a frozen stretch, they didn't even think about the ferocious animals. At that point, they had spent days in the tundra without ever seeing a bear, so it's possible they subconsciously believed they would be totally safe. Little did they know, danger was lurking. The roar of the engines echoed through the silent tundra, a sound that carried far in the still air. They dodged and weaved, laughing and shouting at each other over the noise, each of them challenging the other to be faster and more unpredictable. Alex and Mark were having fun. Their faces were red, their breath mingled with the frigid air. At one point, they stopped their vehicles, meaning to plan their next step. They didn't even see the massive form of the polar bear. The animal, drawn by the noise and movement, stood still, taking in the scene, its beady eyes glimmering strangely. Polar bears, the apex predators of the Arctic, are incredibly dangerous. Their strength and agility, combined with their acute sense of smell and curiosity, make them formidable hunters. Before the friends could react, the bear charged. The ground seemed to shake as the beast moved. The animal was a sight to behold, something out of a nightmare, and it was so quick, it covered the distance between them with terrifying speed. It was a blur of white fur and muscle, driven by pure instinct. Maybe it just wanted to investigate. It most likely wanted to hunt, and Alex and Mark were its prey. Mark was closest to the bear. Alex shouted at his friend, telling him to look out, his voice tinged with panic. The bear barreled toward them, but it was too late. Mark was too slow to react. He didn't even attempt to start the snowmobile. Simply put, his reflexes were nothing against the bear's deadly speed and instincts. The bear collided with Mark's snowmobile, sending him flying through the air. He landed with a sickening thud, his snowmobile skidding away. Alex could feel his stomach turn. Was this it? Was this how their story would end, with this crazed animal tearing them to pieces in the middle of nowhere? His train of thought was interrupted as he saw the polar bear rush toward Mark. The bear was on Mark in an instant. Mark screamed as the bear's claws raked across his body. Blood stained the snow, and the red was a sickening contrast to the blinding white. The sight was horrific, and Alex felt a surge of fear and helplessness as he watched his best friend being mauled by the animal. No doubt Alex would be next, but there was no time to waste, not if he wanted even the slightest chance to save Mark. Alex's mind raced, 1,000 thoughts a second, searching for a way to save his friend. It was the weirdest thing. Alex was obviously panicking, but he also felt stuck, as if he was in a dream. Then, his eyes landed on the flare gun strapped to his snowmobile. Of course. How did he forget about the flare gun? He ran toward the vehicle, the muffled sound of his footsteps being accompanied by Mark's screams of terror. Alex grabbed the flare gun, hands shaking, and fired a shot straight at the polar bear. He knew that if the flare exploded behind the bear might flee toward him. But this was a matter of life and death. It was all or nothing. It was now or never. The flare burst brightly, a loud bang accompanying the flash of light. It hit the bear's side. The animal staggered back, visibly confused. It reared back on its hind legs, confused and disoriented. Alex shouted and waved his arms, making as much noise as possible to drive the bear away. Alex couldn't quite believe his eyes when the bear turned and loped away, disappearing into the Arctic twilight. Alex rushed to Mark's side and dropped to his knees. Mark was barely conscious and scared out of his mind. He was bleeding. Alex tore strips from his jacket to create makeshift bandages. Mark's breathing was shallow, and he was slipping in and out of consciousness. With trembling hands, Alex grabbed the emergency radio from his snowmobile and called for help. He explained the situation, his voice choked with panic. When the responder let him know a rescue team would reach them in 30 minutes, Alex let out a desperate sigh. But he had to stay strong for Mark. Alex did his best to keep Mark warm and conscious, talking to him constantly to prevent him from slipping into shock. He wrapped him in thermal blankets and applied pressure to the wounds to control the bleeding. It was so damn cold, and they were so exposed. Each minute felt like an eternity. Finally, help arrived. Alex let out a relieved breath. As the rescue team approached them, he could feel his muscles relax. Medics rushed to Mark's side, stabilizing him with professional precision. They loaded him onto a stretcher and rushed him to a nearby hospital. Alex never left his friend's side. He was only now beginning to feel the weight of the ordeal settle over him. But they were safe, and after a couple of surgeries, Mark was out of the woods. Still, the Arctic tundra, beautiful and brutal, had taught them a lesson they would never forget. Their story spread, with multiple news outlets picking up the story. Alex and Mark were happy their ordeal, however harrowing, helped raise awareness about the risks of polar bear encounters. Even more, multiple wildlife experts and survival guides reacted to their tale, emphasizing the importance of carrying emergency deterrents and knowing how to use them properly. Alex's quick thinking and the flare gun saved Mark's life, which is a testament to the critical need for preparation in the wild. In June 2017, a solo hiker named Rachel Edwards set out to experience the Yosemite National Park's beauty up close. At 32 years old, Rachel was a free-spirited woman who lived life by her own rules. She would often travel alone, relying on her independence and skills to see herself through any type of situation, no matter how dire. Rachel knew exactly who she was and what she wanted, and right now, she wanted to relish in Yosemite's beauty. Yosemite National Park is a sanctuary of breathtaking landscapes, towering granite cliffs, and ancient sequoias. It is located in the rugged Sierra Nevada mountains of California. The park, which was established in 1890, spans over 1,200 square miles and is home to a diverse array of wildlife, including black bears, mountain lions, and bobcats. That June, Rachel was just one of the thousands of visitors who came from around the world to marvel at Yosemite's landmarks and untamed beauty. Rachel had spent the day of Saturday, June 10th, exploring Yosemite's scenic trails before finally pitching up her tent in a secluded campsite. As dusk fell, Rachel made sure to follow the park's guidelines for food storage carefully. She secured her provisions in a bear canister and hung it from a tree, ensuring it was well out of reach. She then spent a couple of hours listening to the sounds around her. Rachel found the darkening forest to be extremely relaxing, but she was exhausted from the day's adventures. The woman decided it was time to call it a night. She crawled into her sleeping bag and quickly drifted off to sleep. It was about 3 a.m. on June 11th when a hungry black bear ventured into the campsite, looking for food. A sudden, violent ripping sound shattered Rachel's peaceful sleep. Rachel awoke with a jolt. Her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't have time to truly understand what was happening to her. The side of her tent was torn open, and a massive black bear loomed over her. The hungry animal saw Rachel as a potential meal. The bear sank its teeth into her sleeping bag, dragging her out of the tent. Rachel screamed in terror, struggling to free herself from the bear's grip, or at least from the sleeping bag. If she managed to free herself, could she make a run for it? Her mind raced, adrenaline surging through her veins. Remembering her bear spray, Rachel frantically reached for her backpack, which had also been tossed outside of the tent in the chaos. Before she could properly look for the bear spray, the bear briefly released her. Then it clamped its massive jaws onto her hip and started dragging her again. Rachel swallowed a scream. The pain was unbearable. She could feel each sharp tooth sinking into her flesh. She wouldn't die. She held tightly onto her backpack and started looking for the bear spray again. Bingo! She found it. She grabbed the canister and aimed it at the bear's face. She knew that being this close to the bear meant she would most likely be affected by the spray, too. But what was the alternative? The bear paused, its dark eyes glaring at her, and Rachel seized the moment. She unleashed a cloud of bear spray directly at the animal. The bear recoiled, shaking its head and growling in pain and confusion. Rachel sprayed again, emptying the canister until the bear finally released her and staggered back, snarling. Rachel had been right. Her eyes were watery and irritated, and her lungs burned because of the awful smell. Bleeding and in shock, Rachel knew she had to act fast. She dragged herself away from the bear, then watched through tears as the bear left the campsite, running. Rachel fumbled for her emergency whistle, a small but crucial lifeline in situations like this. She blew the whistle with all her might, the piercing sound cutting through the night. She felt like she couldn't breathe. She couldn't open her eyes. But she blew it again and again, each blast a desperate plea for help. A group of campers from a nearby campsite heard the distress calls. They grabbed their flashlights and ran towards the sound. As they approached, they saw Rachel, injured and alone. Her eyes were closed, rimmed with red. She was coughing. The empty bear spray canister next to her told them all they needed to know. The campers rushed to her side, assessing her injuries. They brought her to their own campsite, which was next to a stream, and helped her thoroughly rinse her eyes with the cool, fresh water. They applied pressure to her wounds to stop the bleeding, and then dialed the park rangers. Within minutes, the call was relayed to the rangers and a rescue team was dispatched. They arrived swiftly and took charge of the situation. They carefully loaded her onto a stretcher and transported her to the park's medical center. Rachel was then transported to a hospital. Rachel's ordeal was a lesson posed by wildlife and the need for stringent precautions. Yosemite National Park had long enforced food storage regulations to minimize human-bear conflicts, but this incident prompted an immediate review and tightening of those measures. Park officials decided to increase patrols and install more bear-proof lockers at campsites. They also launched an awareness campaign, educating visitors on the importance of proper food storage and how to respond in the event of a bear encounter. Despite her injuries, Rachel's quick thinking and preparedness had saved her life. Her use of bear spray and the emergency whistle were textbook examples of how to handle a bear attack, and her actions undoubtedly prevented a worse outcome. The Alaskan wilderness is a realm of untamed beauty, a place where towering mountains kiss the sky, a place guaranteed to make your heart race with its promise of adventure and peril. Here, wildlife reigns supreme, and nature's raw power is ever present. In May 2006, Johnny Fairfax, Spencer Griffith, and Daniel Boggs, three friends bonded by their love for adventure, set out on a fishing trip into this remote wilderness, seeking the thrill of the catch and the serenity of the great outdoors. 40-year-old Johnny Fairfax was a seasoned outdoorsman who had spent his childhood exploring the forests of Oregon alongside his father, a survivalist. It was like he had a sixth sense. He could feel the wild and could read the land and anticipate its dangers. Spencer Griffith was also 40. He had an office job, but he was an amateur biologist, always eager to observe and understand the ecosystems they encountered. At 38 years old, Daniel Boggs was an ER nurse from Seattle. He was the practical one in the group, and his medical expertise made him a real asset on their trips. Their journey began with a long drive on rugged dirt roads, followed by a long hike through dense underbrush and over rocky terrain. The men knew exactly when they wanted to camp, right next to a pristine river, which they knew was full of delicious fish waiting to be caught. Finally, they reached the river that would be their home for the next few days. The crystal-clear waters teemed with salmon, just like they knew it would. The friends set up camp on a grassy bank. This would be their base for the next 5 days. They spent the first 2 days fishing from dawn till dusk. As they did so, they told jokes, drank beers, and generally caught up with each other. The third day started the same. They fished for hours and stopped only as the sun dipped below the horizon. The trio then set about preparing their catch by the river. Johnny and Daniel expertly filleted the fish, while Spencer set up a portable stove. The air was rich with the scent of fresh salmon. The friends laughed and reminisced about past adventures. They were more than friends. They were brothers in arms. It was a shame that they could only see each other in person only twice or thrice a year, each of them too busy with their jobs and families. But the camaraderie was always there. Suddenly, they heard a rustling noise in the bushes. Johnny, always alert, looked up and saw a massive grizzly bear emerging from the forest. Its eyes were fixed on the fish, and its nose was twitching up and down, hunger driving its every movement. The bear was a formidable presence, but admiring it was the last thing the guys wanted to do. Johnny's words were a whisper. He let the others know about the bear. They dropped the fish and looked at each other in understanding. They remembered their training and knew that the best way to escape a grizzly's wrath was by keeping calm. They knew running could trigger the bear's predatory instinct. They kept their words low and started moving away slowly, parallel to the river. But the bear was closer than they'd first believed. Soon enough, it almost reached them. Keeping calm was extremely difficult, but Johnny, Spencer, and Daniel were aware this was their best shot. One by one, the friends dropped to the ground, lying down on their stomachs with their hands tightly clasped behind the neck. They had read plenty of stories where grizzlies go for the back of the head and they didn't want to take chances. They spread their legs, another trick meant to make it harder for the bear to turn them over. Then, they waited, breathing slowly. It was awful, pure mental torture. As the bear slowly approached, time dilated. Each second felt like eons. The bear sniffed at Daniel and Spencer for a minute. The animal then approached Johnny. This time around, the bear spent a long time sniffing. Maybe it was because Johnny's hands were still stained with fish blood, or maybe it was because Johnny was having a really bad day. No matter the cause, the bear let out a roar and then struck Johnny with a massive clawed paw. Johnny screamed in pain as the bear's claws dug into his back and shoulders. Staying quiet wasn't an option anymore. Spencer and Daniel sprang into action, their fear giving way to a desperate determination to save their friend. With a trembling but resolute voice, Spencer told Daniel to get the flares. Daniel ran to their camp and grabbed the flare gun from his backpack, his hands shaking as he loaded it. In the meantime, Spencer started shouting at the bear, but the bear managed to turn Johnny over. The situation was turning dire. Johnny's survival instincts kicked in and he started fighting the bear with all his might, punching it and kicking it with his legs. He used rocks, but the grizzly fought back. Then Daniel appeared. He fired a flare into the air, the bright light and loud bang startling the bear. The grizzly paused its attack. Spencer and Daniel shouted at the top of their lungs, waving their arms and creating as much noise as possible. The bear hesitated, growling in frustration. Daniel fired another flare, this one landing near the bear's feet. The combination of light, noise, and the smell of the flares was thankfully enough to scare off the bear. The animal retreated into the forest, leaving a bleeding Johnny on the ground. Breathing heavily, Spencer and Daniel rushed to Johnny's side. His shirt was soaked with blood and he was gasping for air. Daniel's medical training kicked in and he quickly assessed the injuries. Stopping the bleeding was their priority. He decided as he tore strips of cloth to use as makeshift bandages. Spencer cradled Johnny's head, trying to keep him calm by reassuring him with kind words. With the bleeding under control, Daniel reached for their satellite phone. He dialed the emergency number, his fingers slick with blood. 40 minutes later, the sound of helicopter blades cut through the air. Medics quickly took over, stabilizing Johnny and preparing him for transport. Spencer and Daniel joined him and were also flown out of the wilderness. It didn't matter. They didn't want to be there without Johnny anyway. Back in civilization, Johnny received the medical care he needed, and his wounds healed with time. The friends' harrowing experience led to increased awareness about the dangers of bear encounters. Park rangers and wildlife experts emphasized the importance of carrying deterrents like flares and knowing how to use them effectively. The Alaskan wilderness, with its breathtaking beauty and inherent dangers, remained a place of awe and respect for Johnny, Spencer, and Daniel. In June 2018, the Andrew family left their home in Atlanta, Georgia, and embarked on what was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime. they planned to hike one of America's most famous hiking trails. Stretching over 2,180 miles from Georgia to Maine, the Appalachian Trail is a hiker's paradise, winding through some of the most scenic and rugged terrains of the eastern United States. Despite their inexperience, the allure of the trail's natural beauty was irresistible to the Andrew family. They had their family-sized lightweight tent, hammocks, and trekking poles. They knew all about storing their food safely, and they had their enthusiasm to fuel their trip. Jim Andrew, a robust man in his early 40s, led the charge with his wife, Sarah, by his side. Their two boys, 13-year-old Liam and 10-year-old Noah, followed closely behind. The family had always been drawn to nature's raw beauty, and the Appalachian Trail, with its diverse wildlife and breathtaking landscapes, seemed like a perfect escape from their routine in the suburbs of Atlanta. The Appalachian Trail, often referred to as the AT, is renowned for its rich biodiversity. It traverses through multiple national parks and forests, offering a habitat for a wide array of wildlife, including white-tailed deer, raccoons, and, notably, black bears. The Andrews were cautious people. As such, they made sure to pack multiple bear spray canisters. But no matter how cautious and well-prepared the Andrews were, one night changed it all. They camped for the night near a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. It was an ancient place with a unique atmosphere. The place felt almost electrically charged. That night, they cooked their food over a campfire only a few feet away from their tent. After eating, Jim and Sarah meticulously stored their leftovers in bear-proof containers and hung them from a tree branch well away from the camp. Yet, the tantalizing aroma of their meal lingered around the campfire. As dawn broke, rustling in the underbrush caught Jim's attention. The man had risen early to prepare breakfast. He froze as a scrawny yet ferocious-looking black bear emerged from the shadows. The bear's dark eyes glinted with hunger, its nostrils flaring as it caught the scent of last night's dinner. Jim's heart raced, his breath hitching in his throat as he realized his wife and kids were in danger. He had to protect them. It was his duty. The bear's huffing and puffing woke Sarah, Liam, and Noah, who scrambled out of their tents, eyes wide with terror. They knew black bears are normally avoidant of people. But this wasn't a normal bear. The bear, emboldened by the scent of food and the sight of easy prey, reared up on its hind legs, towering over Jim. With a roar, the animal charged. Jim grabbed a nearby branch, brandishing it like a makeshift weapon, but it was no match for the beast's sheer power. The man fell to the ground. As the bear bit and clawed at Jim, Sarah, and the kids shouted at it and hit it with anything they could reach. Backpacks, rocks, pans, and pots were all thrown at the bear, but the animal was too focused on its attack. Sarah screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. Then she remembered the bear spray tucked into Jim's backpack, a precaution they had almost left behind. Sarah told Liam to grab the bear spray. He sprinted to the backpack, but he was shaking with terror, his fingers fumbling with the zipper. He managed to take out the bear spray canisters and then sprinted back to his mother. Sarah, Liam, and Noah were each now armed with bear spray. The bear, momentarily distracted by the commotion, turned its attention toward them. Sarah positioned herself between the bear and her children. As the bear charged at them, Sarah, Liam, and Noah pressed the trigger, unleashing the spray. The bear recoiled, its roars of rage turning to whimpers of pain as the spray hit its sensitive eyes and nose. By then, the kids were crying. But they did it. The bear recoiled, its roars of rage turning to whimpers of pain as the spray hit its sensitive eyes and nose. It stumbled backward and retreated into the woods. The deep gashes across Jim's chest and shoulder bled heavily, but he was conscious, his face pale and contorted in pain. Sarah pressed her hands to his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. Liam brought her the family's first aid kit. It surely wasn't enough to help Jim, but it would have to do for the moment. Sarah worked quickly, her hands trembling. She cleaned the wounds as best she could and applied pressure to stem the bleeding. The boys watched, crying. At his mother's directions, Liam retrieved the emergency beacon from Jim's pack. He activated it, sending a distress signal into the vast expanse of the Appalachian wilderness. They could only hope that help would arrive in time. Sarah held Jim's hand, her mind racing with worry for her husband and gratitude for their narrow escape. The bear spray had saved their lives, but the danger wasn't over yet. Hours passed until help arrived. Sarah would never forget the relief she felt as the rescue team approached their camp. Finally, their ordeal was over. Jim made a quick recovery, but the scars on his chest would forever remind him of their brush with death. He was grateful for his family's quick thinking and courage. He was especially proud of his sons, who had managed to obey and help their mother in the face of extreme horror. Proper food storage and the use of bear spray had been their lifelines, and the Andrews vowed to share their story to help others navigate the unpredictable terrain of the Appalachian Trail. On September 2nd, 2010, friends Nell, Fred, Lee, Kate, and Conrad were on a week-long getaway in the heart of the British Columbia wilderness. They had rented a cabin where they sought refuge from the chaos of city life. They were all in their early to mid-20s, struggling to make sense of their new lives as adults. A vacation in a secluded cabin near a beautiful lake was the perfect way to blow off some steam and recharge their batteries. The first 3 nights were idyllic. They spent their days exploring the rugged trails and evenings huddled by the fire, sipping hot chocolate and competing fiercely in board games. They watched movies and talked about life. The friends loved the cabin, which was a rustic yet cozy retreat. It stood sturdy against the elements, its wooden beams and stone hearth adding to the charm. It also had a big kitchen with a nice dining area, perfect for cooking and eating together. The cabin was quickly becoming their happy place. 3 nights into their week-long vacation, and they were already planning to return next year. The 4th night, however, forever changed their lives. On the 4th night, it started raining. The friends settled in for another evening of fun and coziness. The aroma of their dinner well-done steak with mashed potatoes lingered in the air. They left the kitchen window open for ventilation and because they wanted to hear the rain. Unbeknownst to them, a grizzly bear, a huge animal with a powerful build and a coat of thick fur, was circling the cabin, enticed by the smell of food. It didn't take long for the bear to find the open window. It didn't take long for it to hoist itself through the window and come crashing down. Nell was the first one to discover the sound of the noise. She let out a strangled yelp. The others followed her line of sight. Mayhem ensued. Fred grabbed a poker from the fireplace, but the bear swiped at him, sending him sprawling with a gash across his arm. Lee and Kate scrambled up the stairs, overturning chairs and furniture in their desperate bid to escape. They stopped midway to the first floor, desperate to escape but also feeling a sense of loyalty for their friends. As for Conrad, it wasn't his lucky day. He was standing closest to the bear, and as such, he found himself the primary target of the animal, which had long forgotten about the food and now focused solely on the young man. The bear's eyes, dark and menacing, locked onto him. With a roar that shook the walls, it charged. Conrad tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. As he realized this, Conrad froze and waited to meet his fate, which he guessed wasn't going to be a pretty one. The grizzly lunged for him, claws extended, and struck him with a force that knocked him off his feet. Conrad hit the ground hard, and his breath was knocked out. The bear lunged again and closed its jaws around Conrad's left arm, biting and shaking the man. It was then that Nell remembered she had brought a bear spray canister. The others had laughed at her when she placed the bear spray inside a kitchen drawer, saying there wouldn't be any bears inside their cabins. Well, they were obviously wrong. The young woman shouted to the others, her voice barely cutting through the chaos. Lee, his hands trembling, found the canister in the kitchen drawer and tossed it to her. Nell aimed at the bear, her hands shaking, and unleashed a cloud of the potent spray. They started coughing, but it was the bear that suffered most from the spray. It reared back, shaking its head violently. Lee, seizing the moment, opened the cabin's front door while Kate grabbed a pot and banged it against the counter, adding to the racket. Fred and Lee joined in, shouting and making as much noise as they could, creating a wall of sound to drive the bear back. The bear was scared and overwhelmed. It rushed through the door and ran away, disappearing into the night. The friends watched in disbelief. Lee rushed to close the door. Nell shut the window and then she rushed to Conrad's side. His arm was in a sorry state, mangled and bloody. The friends had to create a makeshift tourniquet to staunch the bleeding. Fred called for emergency help. Kate and Lee barricaded the broken window, their movements frantic and shaky. Rescuers arrived by helicopter a short while after. Conrad was transported to a hospital. His friends drove to the hospital the same night to be with him in his time of need. He needed surgery. Sadly, his arm couldn't be saved. His body would forever tell the story of that night, but the resilience and quick thinking of his friends had saved his life. The incident left an indelible mark on the group. They had come to the British Columbia wilderness, seeking peace and fun, but found themselves face to face with the raw power of nature. In the aftermath, the cabin rental company instituted stricter regulations on food storage and wildlife deterrence measures. Bear-proof containers became mandatory, and windows were reinforced with secure latches. The friends' story served as a cautionary tale, underscoring the need for vigilance and respect for the wild. For Nell, Fred, Lee, Kate, and Conrad, the cabin was a place where they faced their greatest fears and emerged stronger. In 2015, deep in the remote forests of Norway, near the border with Sweden, 3 dedicated wildlife researchers were on the brink of a significant breakthrough. Dr. Ingrid Mikkelsen, the seasoned leader of the group, had spent over a decade studying Eurasian brown bears. With her were Dr. Sofia Nilsson, a recent PhD graduate with a passion for predator-prey dynamics, and Lisa Jorgensen, a field biologist with a knack for taking captivating pictures of wildlife. Together, the 3 women formed a formidable team. They loved the dense Norwegian forest, not only because it was the reason and the background for their work, but because it was also their sanctuary, with its towering pines and moss-covered floor. The Eurasian brown bear, a magnificent yet shy creature, roamed these woods. Known for their impressive size and strength, these bears were a critical part of the ecosystem, and understanding their behavior was crucial for conservation efforts. On this particular day, the trio had set out early, their backpacks filled with equipment. Ingrid led the way, her keen eyes scanning the underbrush for signs of bear activity. Sophia followed closely, her notebook in hand, ready to jot down observations. Lise brought up the rear, her camera slung over her shoulder. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew heavy with the scent of pine and earth. The researchers were intent on their work, documenting bear tracks and collecting samples. They communicated in hushed tones. Sure, speaking loudly is the way to go if you want to scare off bears, but their intention was to observe the animals from afar. As such, they needed to be quiet as they worked. Suddenly, Ingrid froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She signaled for the others to stay still. There it was, right in front of them. A massive Eurasian brown bear, its fur a deep, rich brown, its eyes dark and alert, only 20 feet away. The bear, clearly startled by their presence, let out a low growl. But how could this happen? They simply didn't see the bear. Ingrid knew the bear felt threatened. She slowly raised her hand, signaling Sophia and Lisa to back away. But before they could retreat, the bear charged, covering the distance between them in mere seconds. Ingrid barely had time to react before the bear was upon her, its powerful claws slashing at her legs. Searing pain shot through Ingrid's body as she fell to the ground, her legs a bloody mess. Sophia screamed, her voice piercing the forest air. Lisa, thinking quickly, grabbed a flare gun from her pack. She fired a shot into the air, the bright light and loud bang startling the bear. It hesitated, giving Sophia and Lisa a precious moment to act. With shaking hands, Sophia fumbled for the bear spray. She aimed it at the bear and pressed the trigger. The bear roared in pain, shaking its head and backing away. Lisa fired another flare, the second explosion finally driving the bear back into the forest. With the immediate danger past, Sophia and Lisa rushed to Ingrid's side. Blood soaked the forest floor, and Ingrid's face was pale with shock. Sophia tore open the first aid kit, but she didn't know what to do. She tried to focus and started out by cleaning Ingrid's wounds before wrapping them in gauze. The blood seeped through the bandage, a sickening sight. Lise used their satellite phone to call for help. She could barely keep it together as she relayed their approximate location and Ingrid's state. Despite her pain, Ingrid remained conscious. She couldn't decide whether it was a blessing or a curse. On one hand, she knew it was a good sign. This meant she wasn't losing much blood. On the other, the pain was indeed excruciating, and she couldn't deal with the panic in Sophia and Lisa's eyes. Ingrid felt like she had failed her younger colleagues. She should have been more cautious, but how could she have predicted something like this? The bear appeared out of nowhere. Minutes felt like hours as they waited for help to arrive. The forest, once a place of wonder, now seemed ominous, every rustle of leaves sending shivers down their spines. Sophia monitored Ingrid's condition. Lisa kept watch, her eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of the bear's return. They were out of bear spray. They were out of flares. If the bear decided to return, well, They prayed for help to arrive sooner rather than later. When they heard the distant sound of helicopter blades, they knew they were saved. 10 minutes later, the helicopter lifted off, carrying Ingrid, Sophia, and Lisa to safety. The incident left a deep impression on the researchers. Ingrid's injuries were severe, but thanks to their quick thinking and preparedness, her life was saved. As Ingrid recovered in the hospital, she reflected on the encounter. She had to make amends. She apologized to both Sophia and Lisa, but to her surprise, the women bore her no grudge. They didn't think Ingrid was responsible for the incident. If anything, they felt lucky she was alive and out of harm's way. After all, they had work to do. Surely the experience underscored the importance of being prepared for wildlife encounters, especially in bear habitats. Their training and equipment had made the difference between life and death. And now, having dealt with this awful experience, they would be even more prepared to resume their work. Sophia and Lisa visited Ingrid daily, their bond strengthened by the ordeal they had faced together. The Norwegian wilderness, with its breathtaking beauty and inherent dangers, remained a testament to the delicate balance of nature. For Ingrid, Sophia, and Lisa, it was a place of both peril and profound discovery. Their research would continue, driven by a renewed respect for the creatures they studied and a commitment to ensuring the safety of both wildlife and those who ventured into their domain.